The huge training center on Space Station Nexus Prime was full of noise and movement. Kim Day walked through the main doors and stopped to look around. Everything was so big that it made him feel very small. The ceiling went up so high he could barely see it, and the walls stretched out in all directions, like a small city. Hundreds of alien beings moved around the center, doing different training exercises. Some were tall like trees, while others were wide like trucks. Day had never seen so many different types of creatures in one place before back on Earth. He had only seen pictures of aliens in books and movies, but now he was standing right next to them. A group of reptile-like aliens called saurians stood near the weapon racks. They were at least 8 feet tall with thick green skin that looked like armor. Their yellow eyes watched everything around them like hungry predators. One of them looked at Day and made a sound that might have been laughing. Near the combat rings, some aliens with many arms were practicing with multiple weapons at the same time. These were called cephalopods, and they could use 6 different tools while most beings could only use 2. Day watched one of them fight against 3 training robots at once and win easily. Day looked down at himself and felt even smaller than before. He was only 5 feet 8 inches tall, which was normal for humans, but tiny compared to everyone else here. His black hair was cut short in military style, and his brown eyes looked nervous even though he tried to appear confident. His uniform was the same as everyone else, but it seemed to hang loose on his thin frame. Other recruits whispered to each other as they saw him walk past their translator devices, changed their alien languages into words Day could understand. Most of what he heard was not very nice. They talked about humans like they were some kind of joke. A tall blue alien with 4 arms pointed at Day and said to his friend, "The humans are so weak-looking. Why did they even let them join the Galactic Defense Force?" Another alien with gray skin and big black eyes shook his head and replied, "I heard their planet Earth is very small and far away from the important worlds. They probably just felt sorry for them." Day tried not to listen, but the words made his face feel hot with anger. He had worked very hard to get here, training for 2 years on Earth, doing everything the instructors told him to do, even when the exercises were so difficult. He wanted to quit. He kept going because he wanted to prove that humans belonged among the stars. The training center had different areas for different types of practice. There was a shooting range where recruits learned to use plasma weapons, a combat area with soft mats for hand-to-hand fighting practice, and obstacle courses that tested speed and strength. There were also classrooms for learning about alien cultures and galactic law. Day walked over to the equipment station where a robot handed out gear to new recruits. The plasma rifle felt very heavy in his hands. It was designed for beings much bigger and stronger than humans. The weight made his arms shake a little bit. The armor was even worse. It was supposed to fit all species, but on Day it looked like he was wearing his older brother's clothes. A massive alien walked into the center, and everyone stopped what they were doing to look at him. He was at least 9 feet tall, with blue skin that looked like metal. His muscles were bigger than Day's entire body, and when he walked, the floor seemed to shake under his feet. This was Sergeant Vex, the head training instructor. "Attention all recruits," Vex shouted in a voice like thunder. "Everyone line up in formation for orientation." All the recruits quickly formed neat rows facing the sergeant. Day found himself in the back row behind aliens so tall he could barely see over them. He stood as straight as he could and tried to look like a real soldier. Even though he felt like a child playing dress-up today, you begin your journey to become members of the Galactic Defense Force. Vex continued. "Only the strongest and smartest will pass these tests. Many of you will fail and go home in shame. Those who succeed will have the honor of protecting billions of lives across the galaxies." Vex spoke. Another figure entered the training center. This alien was different from the others Day had seen. He stood about 8 feet tall with gray skin that had natural armor plates covering his chest and arms. His head was long and narrow, with yellow eyes that seemed to glow in the light. Two small tentacles hung from where a human's mouth would be. This is combat instructor. Rax. Vex announced, he is a Krell warrior. From the Krell Empire and one of the most decorated fighters in the galaxy, he has never lost a single combat in over 200 battles. Rax stepped forward and looked at all the recruits with those glowing yellow eyes. When his gaze reached the humans in the back row, Day saw something in those eyes that made his stomach feel cold. It was the look a cat gives a mouse before it strikes. The Krell warrior began to speak in a voice that sounded like rocks grinding together. Some of you come from warrior cultures that have fought for thousands of years. You understand what it means to be strong, to be fierce, to be willing to die for victory. He paused and looked directly at Day and the other two humans. Others come from soft worlds where conflict is rare, where beings live comfortable, safe lives, thinking they can learn to be warriors in a few months. A few of the alien recruits made sounds that might have been laughing. Day felt his hands clench into fists, but he kept them at his sides. He would not give them the satisfaction of seeing him angry. In the coming weeks, Rax continued, you will be tested in every way possible. Your bodies will be pushed beyond their limits. Your minds will be challenged with impossible problems. Your spirits will be broken and rebuilt. You will learn the difference between those born to fight and those born to serve. Fighters Day knew that last part was meant for him and the other humans. Everyone in the training center knew it too. The aliens around him whispered and pointed, making it clear they thought humans would be among the failures. After the orientation speech, the recruits were given room assignments and meal schedules. Day found himself sharing a room with Park and Lee, the other. Two humans in his training group. Park was taller than Day, with broad shoulders, and looked like he might have been a weightlifter back on Earth. Lee was shorter, but moved with quick, precise movements like a dancer. We need to stick together, Park said quietly as they unpacked their few belongings. Did you see how they looked at us? Like we were some kind of insects. Lee nodded and added, I heard some of them talking about betting on how long we would last. Most think we will quit in the first. Day sat on his narrow bed and looked at his new plasma rifle leaning against the wall. He thought about his family back on Earth, who were so proud when he was selected for galactic training. He thought about his little sister who told everyone her brother was going to be a space soldier. He thought about all the humans who were counting on him and Park and Lee to prove they belonged among the stars. We are not going to quit, Day said firmly. We are going to show them that humans can be just as good as any other species. Maybe we are not as big or strong, but we have something they do not expect. What is that? Park asked. Day smiled for the first time since arriving at the station. We have nothing to lose and everything to prove. 2 weeks into training, the instructors announced the beginning of advanced combat simulations. These were not simple tests of strength or speed, but complex missions that required teamwork, strategy, and the ability to think under pressure. The holographic training facility could create any environment from jungle worlds to space stations, making the simulations feel completely real. Day found himself assigned to Squad 7, a mixed group of 6 recruits from different species. Their squad leader was Orcs, the same Saurian who had easily defeated him in hand-to-hand combat. The big reptilian alien made it clear from the start that he remembered their previous encounter and was not impressed. Stay in the back, human Orcs ordered as they reviewed their mission briefings. Try not to get in the way when real fighters are working. Your job is to carry extra ammunition and call for help, if we need it. The other squad members seemed to agree with this plan. A Titan named Brog nodded his massive blue head and said, the human is too weak for combat, but maybe he can be useful for support duties. Their fourth member was a cephalopod called Six, who could use multiple weapons at once. Even she seemed doubtful about having a human on the team. I have heard humans panic easily during battle, she said, with her translator making her voice sound like music. 6 of her arms moved independently as she checked her equipment. Maybe he should wait at the landing zone. The fifth squad member was Vel, the same feline who had destroyed Day on the agility course. Her cat-like face showed no emotion as she looked at the human, but her tail swished back and forth in what Day was learning meant irritation among her species. The last member was a gray-skinned alien called Dust, whose species were known for their ability to become nearly invisible in most environments. He said nothing about Day, but his large black eyes seemed to suggest he thought the human would be dead weight. Their mission was complex and dangerous. Squad 7 had to infiltrate an enemy-controlled facility, rescue a captured ally, and escape while under heavy fire. The holographic enemies were programmed to fight with the same skills and tactics as real galactic threats, making them deadly even in simulation. The facility was a maze of corridors and rooms built into the side of a mountain. Each room might contain enemies or traps, and the squad had only limited information about the layout their target was being held somewhere in the deepest level, but they would have to fight their way through multiple floors to reach him. From the moment they entered the facility, everything started going wrong. The main entrance was more heavily guarded than expected, and their planned route was blocked by enemy patrols. Orcs tried to adapt their strategy, but the situation kept getting worse with each passing minute. "We need to find another way in," Orcs hissed as plasma bolts flew over their heads from enemy positions. "The front approach is too dangerous." Brog suggested using his massive strength to break through a wall, but the facility was built too strong even for Titan power. Six wanted to use her multiple arms to fight through the enemies directly, but there were too many of them. Vel thought they should try to sneak around the patrols, but the corridors were too narrow and well lit. While his squad mates argued about tactics, Day studied the enemy positions and movement patterns. The holographic soldiers followed realistic behavior programs, which meant they had strengths and weaknesses just like real beings. He noticed something that none of the others had seen. Their heavy weapons rotate every 90 seconds. Day said quietly to get the squad attention. When they move the big guns to cover the east corridor, the west side is unprotected for about 15 seconds. Impossible corks snapped. That would be a basic tactical error. No competent force would leave such an obvious gap, but Day had been watching and timing the enemy movements for 10 minutes. He was certain about what he had observed. The heavy weapon teams were following a standard rotation pattern that created a brief vulnerability during each cycle. "Look at that debris pile near the west." Walday continued, pointing to a section of broken concrete and twisted metal. "If we time it right, we can reach that cover during their rotation, then move to the next position when they rotate again." "That is suicide." Orcs replied, "The space between cover points is completely exposed. Any sane being would be cut down, trying to cross it." Day understood why the others could not see the opportunity. The gap between cover positions was too small for large species to cross quickly, but a human could make it if he moved fast and used the debris for partial concealment. The key was understanding that the path was not meant for beings the size of Titans or Saurians. "Trust me," Day said, looking each squad member in the eyes. "I have been watching them, and I know this will work." Before anyone could argue further, the enemy forces began advancing on their position. The squad was running out of time and options. Orcs looked around desperately, then made a decision that surprised everyone. "Fine human, you take point. Show us this miraculous gap in their defenses, but when you get killed, do not expect us to risk our lives retrieving your body." Day checked his plasma rifle and waited for the next weapon rotation. As soon as the heavy guns swung toward the east corridor, he sprinted across the open ground, using every piece of debris for cover. The plasma bolts that chased him came close enough to heat the air around his body, but none of them found their target. He reached the first cover position. Just as the weapons began rotating back toward his location, the other squad members followed one at a time, moving during the brief windows when the heavy guns were pointed away. Each of them made it safely, though several came very close to being hit. Once they were all in the new position, The path to the facility entrance was much clearer. The enemy forces had been positioned to stop attacks from the original direction, but now Squad 7 was approaching from an unexpected angle. How did? You see that Vel asked as they prepared for the next phase of the mission. Her feline eyes studied Day with new interest. I have enhanced vision, and I did not notice the weapon rotation pattern. Day shrugged, not sure how to explain it himself. Humans learn to watch for patterns, he said. It helps us survive when we are not the biggest or strongest. The infiltration of the facility went more smoothly. After that, Day continued to spot details that the others missed. He noticed that certain corridors had different lighting, which indicated they were more heavily patrolled. He saw that some rooms had dust patterns on the floor, showing where guards walked regularly. He even figured out that the enemy used specific sound signals to communicate. Between posts, each observation helped Squad 7 avoid detection and move deeper into the facility without triggering major alarms. The other squad members began asking Day what he thought about upcoming obstacles instead of telling him to stay back and keep quiet. When they finally reached the prison level, they found their target, but also discovered that the enemy had set a trap. 3 squads of holographic soldiers were waiting in ambush positions that would have destroyed any rescue. Team using conventional tactics, the obvious approach was blocked. The ventilation systems were monitored, and the enemy had positioned themselves to cover all normal escape routes. It looked like an impossible situation that would require them to fight through overwhelming odds. But Day noticed something else about the facility layout. The architects had built the prison level with structural supports that created blind spots in the enemy surveillance system. More importantly, there was a maintenance tunnel that connected to the main power system for this section of the building. If we cut power to this entire level for exactly 30 seconds, the emergency lighting will come on, but their targeting systems will reset during the transition. Day explained to his squad. That gives us a window to reach our target and extract him before they can coordinate their response. How do you know their targeting systems will reset? Orcs asked suspiciously. Because that is how all advanced electronic systems work, Day replied. When power is interrupted, they need time to restart and recalibrate. During that time, we can move without being tracked by their computers. The plan was risky and required perfect timing, but it was better than trying to fight through 3 enemy squads in a direct assault. Dust used his camouflage abilities to reach the power controls. 6 used her multiple arms to set up covering fire positions. Vel prepared to move fast during the blackout while Brog got ready to carry their target if he was injured. Orcs looked at Day with an expression the human had never seen before. It was not respect exactly, but it was not contempt either. It was confusion mixed with something that might have been the beginning of understanding. Execute the plan. Orcs ordered. Day cut the power at exactly the right moment, and Squad 7 moved through the facility like ghosts. They reached their target, extracted him from his cell, and were halfway to the exit before the enemy forces realized what had happened. The entire mission was completed with 0 casualties and minimal combat. As they returned to the training facility, other squads were still struggling with their own simulations. Some had failed completely while others had succeeded but taken heavy losses. Squad 7 had not only completed their mission perfectly, but had done it faster than any previous team. The instructors reviewed the mission recordings with obvious interest. Sergeant Vex called for a special analysis session where all the recruits could watch highlights from different squad performances. When Squad 7 mission played, everyone saw Day pointing out enemy weaknesses that no one else had. The first week of training was like being thrown into a nightmare that never ended. Every morning at 5, the recruits were woken by loud buzzers. Every day brought new tests that seemed designed to break their bodies and spirits. Every night, Day fell into bed feeling like he had been hit by a truck. The physical fitness tests were the worst part for the humans. While the Saurians lifted weights that could crush cars and the cephalopods moved through obstacle courses like flowing water, Day and his fellow humans struggled with every exercise. The equipment was built for larger, stronger species, and nothing seemed to fit right. During the strength assessment, Day could barely lift half the weight that was considered normal for galactic recruits. The testing machine made disappointing sounds every time it recorded his scores. The number that appeared on the screen was highlighted in red, meaning it was far below acceptable standards. A group of Titan recruits watched Day struggle with a simple lifting exercise that they could do with one hand. Their deep voices rumbled with laughter as the small humans strained to move weight. They considered light. The sound echoed through the training hall, making everyone aware of how weak he was. "Look at the human," one of them said in a voice like distant thunder. "He cannot even lift what we use for warming up. How did his species ever survive long enough to reach space?" "Maybe they are very good at running away," another Titan replied. Causing more laughter from the group, Day felt his face burn with embarrassment, but he kept trying to complete the exercise. Even when his muscles screamed in pain and his hands shook from the effort, he refused to give up. The machine finally registered that he had completed the minimum number of repetitions, but his score was still the lowest in the entire group. The speed tests were no better. Day could run fast for a human, but compared to the other species, he might as well have been walking. The Krell recruits moved like lightning, their armored bodies covering ground so quickly they seemed to blur. The cat-like aliens called felines were even faster, moving with such grace and speed that they looked like they were dancing instead of running. When it was time for agility training, Day found himself competing against a feline recruit named Vel. The obstacle course included climbing walls, jumping over barriers, crawling through tunnels, and swinging across gaps. Vel completed the entire course, in less than 2 minutes, moving so smoothly it looked effortless. Day took over 4 minutes to finish the same course and only managed that because he refused to quit. Several times he fell from climbing walls or missed jumps that should have been easy. His armor was too loose and kept catching on obstacles, slowing him down even more. By the time he crossed the finish line, most of the other recruits had gotten bored and walked away, but Instructor Rax was still watching. He stood at the edge of the course with his arms crossed and his yellow eyes fixed on Day. The expression on his armored face might have been pity if Day had not known it was actually contempt. Pathetic Rax announced loudly enough for everyone to hear, "A child from my homeworld could complete that course faster, and they do not even begin warrior training until they are older than this human." The marksmanship tests offered a brief hope that humans might excel at something. All species in the galaxy used similar energy weapons, and humans had always been good with tools and technology on Earth. Day had practiced with simulation weapons during his training on Earth and felt confident about this test. The plasma rifles used by the Galactic Defense Force were more advanced than anything on Earth, but the basic principles were the same: point, aim, and fire. The targets were holographic projections that appeared at different distances and moved in unpredictable patterns. Each recruit had to hit as many targets as possible in a limited time. Day managed to hit about 60% of his targets, which was not excellent, but at least it was respectable. Several of the other species scored lower than he did, and for a moment he felt like maybe humans could compete after all. His accuracy was decent, and his reaction time was faster than some of the larger species. Then the Krell recruits took their turn, and Day realized that 60% was actually terrible. Rack's own people hit 90% of their targets, or better, moving and shooting with mechanical precision that seemed impossible. The plasma bolts flew from their weapons like guided missiles, never missing even the most difficult moving targets. Even worse, some of the Krell recruits were hitting targets while moving, running through the course, and shooting without even seeming to aim. They made it look as easy as breathing, while Day had to concentrate completely just to hit stationary targets. "Your marksmanship is adequate for a maintenance worker," Rax commented as he reviewed Dai's scores. "Perhaps you could shoot broken equipment instead of enemies, though I doubt you could hit something that large either." The tactical knowledge tests were the only area where humans showed any real promise. The written exams covered military history, alien cultures, and strategic thinking. Day found these much easier than the physical challenges. His scores were above average, and Park actually scored in the top 10% of all recruits. But Rax dismissed these results as meaningless. "Theory is for classroom scholars," he announced. "Real warriors learn tactics through blood and battle, not by reading books. A clever coward is still a coward." The worst humiliation came during the hand combat demonstrations. Each recruit was paired with someone from a different species to test their adaptability and fighting skills. Day found himself matched against a saurian named Orcs, who was only medium-sized for his species, but still twice as heavy as the human. The combat mat was surrounded by other recruits who had finished their own matches. Most of them stayed to watch what everyone knew would be a one-sided beating. The betting among the aliens was not about who would win, but about how quickly the saurian would defeat the human Orcs looked down at Day with yellow reptilian eyes that showed no emotion at all. His thick green skin was like natural armor, and his clawed hands looked like they could tear through metal. The size difference was so obvious that several recruits laughed. Just seeing them stand together, Sergeant Vex commanded from the edge of the mat. Orcs did not rush forward or try to show off. He simply walked toward Day with the confidence of someone who knew the outcome was never in doubt. When he was close enough, he reached out with one massive hand to grab the human by the shoulder. Day tried to dodge, but Orcs was faster than he looked. The saurian's hand clamped down on Dai's shoulder, like a steel trap, lifting him off the ground as easily as picking up a small child. Day kicked and struggled, but it was like fighting against a machine. The throw that followed sent Day flying across the mat to land hard on his back. The impact knocked the wind out of his lungs and made stars appear in his vision. Before he could recover, Orcs was standing over him, ready to pin him for the victory. Day rolled away and tried to get back to his feet, but Orcs caught him again. This time, the saurian grabbed Dai's arm and twisted it behind his back in a hold that made the human cry out in pain. The match could have ended there, but Orcs seemed to be enjoying himself. "Look how the human flails around like a trapped animal," Orcs said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Maybe we should keep him as entertainment." The other recruits laughed, and some made suggestions about what else they could do with the helpless human. Day felt anger and shame burning in his chest, but there was nothing he could. Orcs was simply too strong, too fast, and too skilled for him to have any chance. The match ended when Orcs finally got bored and pinned Day to the mat with one knee on his chest. The human struggled for a few more seconds, but everyone could see it was hopeless. Sergeant Vex called the match in favor of the saurian, though the outcome had never been in doubt. As Day slowly got to his feet, rubbing his sore arm and trying to catch his breath, he saw Instructor Rax step onto the mat. The Krell warrior towered over the defeated human, his yellow eyes glowing with satisfaction. "This is what happens when prey tries to fight predators," Rax announced to the assembled recruits. "Some species are born to hunt, others are born to be hunted. This human has learned which category his kind belongs to." The laughter that followed was the worst part. It was not just amusement at seeing someone lose a fight. It was the sound of beings who had decided that humans were a joke, not worthy of respect, or even pity. Day looked around at all the alien faces surrounding him and saw the same expression everywhere, contempt mixed with second-hand embarrassment. They were not just disappointed in his performance. They were embarrassed for him, embarrassed that he had even tried as he walked off the mat. Day heard the whispered comments that followed him. Maybe now the humans will realize they do not belong here. Perhaps they will quit and save everyone the trouble of watching them fail that night in his small room. Day lay awake staring at the ceiling and wondering if everyone was right. Maybe humans really were not meant to be warriors. Maybe they belonged on their small, distant planet, taking care of peaceful things and leaving the fighting to species that were actually good at it, But even as these doubts filled his mind, another voice whispered in the back of his thoughts, telling him that something was not right about what had happened. Something about the way everyone expected him to fail the way they all seemed so sure that humans could not compete. He did not know what it was yet, but Day had the feeling that everyone, including himself, was missing something important about what it. The challenge was scheduled for the final day of training, when all recruits would normally receive their graduation assignments. The entire training facility buzzed with excitement as word spread throughout the galactic military network. High-ranking officers from multiple species requested permission to attend what many were calling the most important military demonstration in recent history. Day spent the days before the challenge trying to prepare for something he did not fully understand. The format would include multiple tests designed to compare human tactical thinking against traditional Krell warrior methods. But nobody could tell him exactly what he would face because the challenges were being designed by a committee of senior military leaders. Park and Lee tried to help their fellow human train, but they were just as uncertain about what was coming. The three humans practiced together, sharing ideas about how to approach different types of problems, but without knowing the specific challenges. It was mostly guesswork. Meanwhile, Instructor Rax seemed completely confident about the upcoming confrontation. He continued his normal training duties, but there was a new energy in his movements. His yellow eyes glowed brighter, and his mandibles clicked constantly with anticipation. Every alien recruit could see that the Krell warrior was looking forward to proving his superiority. The night before the challenge, Day lay in his narrow bed, staring at the ceiling and trying not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. He had never wanted to represent his entire species in anything, let alone a military competition against one of the galaxy's most feared warriors. But the choice had been made, and there was no backing down now. At dawn on Challenge Day, the main training hall was transformed into something resembling an ancient gladiatorial arena. Seating had been arranged in tiers around a central combat area, allowing hundreds of spectators to watch from all angles. Camera systems would broadcast the event to military academies across the galaxy. General Vox stood at the center of the arena wearing his most formal armor. The medals and decorations covering his chest represented victories in conflicts that had shaped galactic history. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who had commanded millions of soldiers. Today, we witness something that has never happened before in galactic military history. He announced a direct comparison between two completely different approaches to warfare: traditional warrior culture against innovative tactical thinking. The general gestured toward Instructor Rax, who stood tall and proud in ceremonial Krell battle armor. His natural armor plates had been polished until they gleamed like metal, and his weapons were the finest examples of Krell craftsmanship. Every detail of his appearance radiated power and confidence, representing traditional warrior philosophy. "We have Instructor Rax General," Vox continued. "A Krell champion who has never known defeat in over 200 personal combats. His victories include single-handed destruction of enemy strongholds and leadership of successful campaigns against numerically superior forces." Applause thundered through the arena as alien spectators showed their respect for the legendary warrior. Rax acknowledged the cheers with a slight nod, but his yellow eyes remained fixed on his human opponent. He looked like a predator that had been waiting years for this moment. On the other side of the arena, General Vox gestured toward Day, who looked impossibly small in his standard recruit uniform. The contrast between the two opponents was so dramatic that several spectators made sounds of disbelief or amusement. "Representing innovative tactical thinking, we have Recruit Day," the general announced, "a human who has demonstrated problem-solving abilities that challenge everything we thought we knew about military strategy. His recent mission success showed tactical awareness that surpassed warriors with decades of experience." The applause for Day was much quieter, but it came from unexpected sources. Some of the military strategists and senior officers clapped respectfully while most of the recruit spectators remained silent. They were clearly waiting to see if the small human could back up his reputation. The first challenge was announced as a test of situational awareness. Both opponents would be placed in identical holographic environments, filled with hidden threats and tactical opportunities. They would have 30 minutes to identify as many important details as possible, with points awarded for accuracy and relevance. Rax entered his simulation with the confidence of someone who had survived countless real battlefields. His enhanced Krell senses allowed him to detect movement sounds and even chemical traces that would be invisible to most species. He moved through the environment like a hunter, cataloging every potential threat. In the neighboring simulation, Day approached the same environment completely differently. Instead of relying on superior senses, he studied patterns in the placement of objects, the wear patterns on surfaces, and the logical flow of how the space would be used. He noticed details that had nothing to do with immediate threats, but everything to do with understanding the bigger picture. When the results were announced, Rax had identified 43 potential combat threats and 17 tactical positions. The crowd applauded his performance, which was exactly what everyone expected from a legendary Krell warrior. Day had identified only 26 combat threats, but he had also found 38 logistical details that revealed enemy supply lines, communication patterns, and strategic weaknesses. His analysis included information that could be used to predict enemy movements and disrupt their operations. The second challenge tested adaptive problem-solving. Both opponents faced the same series of tactical puzzles that required them to overcome obstacles using limited resources. The problems were designed to have no obvious solutions, forcing competitors to think creatively under pressure. Rax attacked each problem with straightforward Krell logic, using superior strength and direct confrontation to break through barriers. His solutions were effective but predictable, following patterns that any military strategist could anticipate. Day approached the same problems from angles that nobody expected. He found ways to turn obstacles into advantages, used misdirection instead of force, and solved several puzzles using methods that made the designers question their own assumptions about how the challenges were supposed to work. By this point, the spectators were completely absorbed in watching two different philosophies of warfare compete in real time. The traditional approach was producing solid, reliable results, while the innovative approach was creating solutions that seemed almost magical, but everyone knew that the final challenge would determine the real winner. Hand-to-hand combat between the opponents with no weapons, no armor, and no rules, except that the fight continued until one warrior could not continue. The arena fell completely silent as Rax and Day faced each other in the center of the combat circle. The size difference was even more dramatic now. With nothing but their natural abilities to rely on, Rax stood over 8 feet tall. With natural armor and muscles that could crush steel, Day looked like a child standing next to a giant. This is where clever thinking ends, Rax announced loudly enough for everyone to hear, and where real strength begins. The fight began with Rax doing exactly what everyone expected. He charged forward, using his massive size and overwhelming power to end the combat quickly. His strategy was simple: grab the human and crush him before any tactical thinking could matter. But Day was not where Rax expected him to be. The human had moved not away from the attack, but into it, slipping past the Krell warrior's guard in a way that seemed impossible to observers who thought in terms of traditional combat. What followed was unlike any fight the spectators had ever seen. Day fought like no other species in the galaxy, using leverage and momentum instead of strength, targeting nerve clusters and joint vulnerabilities that existed even in heavily armored beings. Every move was calculated to turn Rax's own advantages against him. Rax found himself confused and off balance, fighting an opponent who refused to engage in the kind of strength-based combat he understood. The human seemed to disappear and reappear in positions that left the Krell warrior vulnerable to attacks he could not defend against. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the legendary warrior who had never lost a fight struggled against an opponent who weighed less than his weapon. Rax tried to use his superior reach and strength, but every attack seemed to flow around the human like water around a stone. The end came suddenly. Rax committed to a devastating overhead strike that should have crushed his opponent into the floor. Instead, Day stepped forward, redirected the attack, and used a leverage technique that sent the massive Krell warrior crashing to the ground with enough force to crack the arena surface. Rax lay on his back, staring up at the ceiling, his yellow eyes wide with shock and confusion. Two pieces of his mandible lay on the floor beside him, broken off from the impact of his fall. The warrior, who had never known defeat, struggled to understand how he had ended up looking at the arena lights. Day stood quietly beside the fallen instructor. Not even breathing hard after what everyone had expected to be his own destruction, he looked down at Rax with an expression of respect mixed with sadness, as if he regretted having to prove his point so dramatically. I think Day said quietly, extending his hand to help the defeated warrior back to his feet. That is what you call being surprised. The arena remained silent for several long seconds as hundreds of alien minds tried to. The next morning came too early for Day. A loud buzzer woke all the recruits at 5 in the morning before the artificial sun on the space station had even started to brighten. Day rolled out of his bed, feeling sore from sleeping on the hard mattress. His roommates Park and Lee looked just as tired as he felt. "All recruits report to main training hall immediately," a voice announced over the speakers. "No delays will be tolerated." Day quickly put on his uniform and grabbed his equipment. The plasma rifle still felt too heavy, but he was starting to get used to the weight. The armor was loose in some places and tight in others, but the equipment robot had said it was the best fit available for his size. The main training hall was packed with recruits from dozens of different worlds and species. Day counted at least 20 different types of aliens. Some he recognized from the orientation yesterday, but others were completely new to him. There were beings with fur and beings with scales, beings with extra arms and beings with extra eyes. Sergeant Vex stood at the front of the hall next to Instructor Rax. The Krell warrior looked even more intimidating in the bright lights. His natural armor plates seemed to shine like metal, and his yellow eyes moved constantly, as if he was looking for enemies to fight. "Today we begin your real education," Vex announced in his booming voice. "You will learn the difference between playing soldier and being a soldier. You will discover what it truly means to serve in the Galactic Defense Force, Instructor." Rax stepped forward, and the hall became completely quiet. Even the largest and strongest aliens seemed to respect and fear the Krell warrior. Day could feel the power radiating from Rax like heat from a fire. "I have fought in wars across 17 different star systems." Rax began, his voice like grinding stone. "I have faced enemies that would make your worst nightmares seem like pleasant dreams. I have killed creatures so dangerous that entire planets feared to speak their names." He paused and let his yellow eyes scan across all the recruits. When his gaze fell on the humans, Day saw the same cold expression as the day before. It was clear that Rax did not think much of humans or their ability to become warriors in those battles. "I learned a simple truth," Rax continued. "Some species are born to hunt. Others are born to be hunted. Some are predators and others are prey. The galaxy is not a kind place, and it does not care about your feelings or your hopes. Only strength matters. Only the ability to kill your enemies before they kill you." A few of the alien recruits nodded in agreement. Dai noticed that most of them were from the larger, more aggressive species. The smaller, more peaceful aliens looked uncomfortable with Rax's words, just like the humans did. Rax walked closer to where the recruits were standing. His footsteps made heavy sounds on the metal floor like a giant walking through a village. Each step seemed to echo in the large hall, making everyone aware of how big and dangerous he was. "I have heard stories about some of the newer species in our galaxy," Rax said. with what might have been amusement species that think they can become warriors through study and practice instead of being born to it. Species that believe courage can replace strength and determination can replace natural ability. They felt his face getting hot again. He knew Rax was talking about humans, even though the instructor had not said the word human. Everyone in the hall understood what he meant. Several of the larger aliens made quiet sounds that were probably laughter. Tell me, Rax said, suddenly stopping directly in front of the section where Day and the other humans were standing. What does a herbivore know about hunting? What does prey understand about being a predator? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Day could feel everyone looking at him and the other humans waiting to see what they would do. Most of the aliens probably expected them to stay quiet and accept the insult, but something inside Day would not let that happen, respectfully. Sir Day said, stepping forward slightly, "I think you might be surprised by what humans can do." The hall became even quieter than before, if that was possible. Every alien recruit turned to stare at Day with expressions of shock and disbelief. No one had expected one of the small, weak humans to actually speak back to the legendary Krell warrior, Rax Yellow. Eyes focused on Day like laser beams. The tentacles around his mouth moved in what Day later learned was a sign of either amusement or anger among Krell warriors. His natural armor plates seemed to shift and adjust as his muscles tensed, surprised. Rax repeated the word slowly as if he was tasting it, "By a soft-skinned creature that weighs less than my weapon, by a being so weak that a stiff breeze might knock him over. Tell me, little human, what could you possibly do that would surprise a Krell warrior who has never known defeat?" They felt his heart beating so fast it seemed like it might burst out of his chest. Every instinct told him to back down, to apologize, to run away. But he thought about his family back on Earth. He thought about all the humans who had dreamed of reaching the stars but never had the chance. He thought about his little sister who believed her brother could do anything. "I suppose we will find out during the training," Sir Day replied as calmly as he could manage. Rax. Tentacles moved faster now, definitely showing amusement. He looked around at the other recruits as if sharing a private joke with them. Many of them were trying not to laugh openly at the small human who dared to challenge one of the galaxy's most feared warriors. "Very well," little human Rax said with obvious satisfaction. "Since you are so confident, let me tell you what will happen during these trials. You will fail every physical test because you are too weak. You will panic during combat situations because you have never faced real danger. You will quit before the first week is over because you will realize you do not belong here." He leaned down closer to Day, bringing his armored face within inches of the human. The smell of metal and something predatory filled Day's nose, making him want to step back. But he forced himself to stand his ground, and "When you do quit," Rax whispered loud enough for everyone to hear, "I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember that. I told you exactly what would happen. A real warrior can see weakness in others, just like a hunter can smell fear in prey." Day looked up into those glowing yellow eyes and saw something that made him angry. It was not just contempt or amusement. It was absolute certainty that humans were nothing more than a joke, a mistake that somehow ended up among real warriors. "Then I guess we will both learn something new, sir," Day said quietly. Rax straightened up and made a sound that was definitely laughter. Now other recruits joined in, though some of the smaller species looked worried about what they had just witnessed. Even Sergeant Vex seemed surprised by the exchange between the human and the Krell instructor. "We shall see, little human," Rax said, turning away from Day. "We shall see indeed." As the briefing continued and the recruits were divided into training groups, Day noticed that many of the aliens were looking at him differently now. Some seemed curious about what the human had been thinking. When he challenged Rax, others looked at him like he was already dead. They just had not buried him yet. Park and Lee stayed close to Day as they moved to their first training station. Both of them looked worried about what had just happened in the Main hall? Are you crazy? Park whispered. You just made an enemy of the most dangerous instructor here. Maybe, Lee added, but maybe that was the right thing to do. If we are going to prove humans belong here, we cannot act like scared children every time someone insults us. Day nodded, but inside he was wondering if he had made a terrible mistake. Rax was not just any instructor, he was a legendary warrior who could probably kill Day with one hand. But the challenge had been made, and there was no taking it back now. All he could do was try to prove that humans were more than anyone expected, including himself. Word about Squad 7 perfect mission spread through the training facility faster than a virus. Within hours, every recruit and instructor knew about the human who had found weaknesses that nobody else could see. The story grew with each telling, until some versions made it sound like Day had single-handedly defeated an entire enemy army, but the truth was impressive enough to make everyone start looking at humans differently. 3 training squads had attempted the same rescue mission before. Squad 7 and all of them had failed. 2 squads lost so many members they had to abort the mission completely. The 3rd squad succeeded, but half their members were marked as casualties by the simulation system. The combat analysis computers broke down every detail of each mission attempt. The data showed that previous squads had superior firepower, better physical capabilities, and more combat experience than Squad 7, yet they had all struggled with challenges that the human had solved. Almost effortlessly, Instructor Vex called for a special review session in the main auditorium. Every recruit and training staff member was required to attend. The massive hall was packed with beings from across the galaxy, all curious to understand what had happened during the rescue simulation. The lights dimmed, and holographic displays showed footage from multiple camera angles during Squad 7 mission. Everyone could see Day pointing out the weapon rotation pattern that had been invisible to his larger, stronger squad mates. They watched him identify the power system vulnerability that made their extraction possible. Most importantly, the recordings showed something that surprised even the most experienced military minds. The human was not trying to fight like other species. Instead, he was using completely different methods that turned traditional warfare concepts upside down. Notice how the human approaches each problem, Vex announced as the footage played. He does not ask how to overpower the enemy or how to match their strength. Instead, he looks for ways to avoid their strengths entirely. The recordings were slowed down so everyone could see exactly what Day had been doing. His eyes moved constantly, scanning for details that others missed. His body language showed him thinking and calculating, while his squad mates focused on direct confrontation. Here we see tactical thinking that has never been documented in galactic military records. Vex continued, the human treats every obstacle as a puzzle to be solved, rather than a barrier to be smashed through. Senior instructors from other training facilities had been called in to review the footage. Military strategists who had studied warfare for centuries watched the recordings with growing amazement. Some of them asked to see certain sections replayed multiple times. A Krell general named Vox stood up during the presentation. His armor was covered with medals and scars from real battles that had shaped galactic history. When he spoke, every being in the auditorium listened with complete attention. I have fought in 47 major conflicts across 18 star systems. The general announced, I have seen every type of warrior culture in the known galaxy. But what this human demonstrates is not traditional warfare at all. He paused and looked directly at Day, who was sitting near the back of the auditorium with the other recruits. The general's yellow eyes showed the same confusion that many others were feeling. This is something entirely new, he continued. A way of thinking about combat that treats every engagement as an intellectual challenge rather than a test of physical dominance. Other instructors began sharing their own observations. A Titan Colonel pointed out that humans seem to excel at pattern recognition in ways that larger-brained species could not match. A cephalopod admiral noted that human tactical flexibility surpassed even her people's famous ability to multitask. Most surprising comments came from species that were known for their intelligence rather than their fighting ability. A crystalline being whose people were master scientists said that human problem-solving reminded him of advanced mathematical concepts. An energy creature that existed as pure thought admitted that human creativity was beyond anything in their databases, but not everyone was convinced by what they were seeing. Instructor Rax had remained silent during most of the presentation, but finally he stood up and addressed the assembly. His voice carried the authority of someone who had never lost a battle. "This is all very interesting," he said in a tone that suggested it was not interesting at all. But clever thinking means nothing. When plasma bolts are flying and enemies are trying to kill you, real combat is not a puzzle to be solved. It is survival of the strongest. Several alien recruits nodded in agreement, especially those from traditional warrior cultures. They understood. Physical dominance and respected beings who could fight with claw and fang. The idea that a weak species might have military value seemed absurd to them. Rax continued his criticism with growing intensity. "I have watched this human fail every test of real warrior ability. He cannot lift adequate weight. He cannot run fast enough. He cannot fight hand-to-hand against any serious opponent." The Krell instructor gestured toward Day with obvious contempt. "When enemies are shooting at him, he will not have time to study their patterns. When a real warrior charges him, he will not be able to think his way out of being crushed." The auditorium fell silent as Rax's words echoed through the hall. Many of the recruits looked back and forth between the instructor and the human, wondering what would happen next. The tension was so thick it seemed like the air itself was holding its breath. General Vox stood up again, and his presence commanded immediate attention. Even Rax stopped talking and waited to hear what the senior officer would say. The general looked at both the instructor and the human recruit with an expression that was impossible to read. "There is only one way to resolve this debate." The general announced, "We need to see how human tactics perform against traditional Krell warfare in direct competition." The suggestion sent whispers racing through the auditorium. A direct challenge between species was almost unheard of in modern galactic military training. But everyone understood that this was bigger than just one human recruit or one Krell instructor. This was about the future of warfare itself. "I propose a series of challenges that will test both approaches," the general continued. "Physical strength, tactical thinking, individual combat, and team leadership. Let us see which philosophy produces better results." Instructor Rax's yellow eyes glowed brighter as he considered the proposal. His mandibles clicked with what everyone recognized as eager anticipation. The idea of proving Krell superiority in formal competition appealed to his warrior pride. "I accept this challenge," Rax announced loudly, "but I want it understood that when the human fails these tests, there will be no more discussion about clever thinking, replacing real strength." All eyes turned to Day, who had been sitting quietly through the entire debate. He felt the weight of expectations from every being in the auditorium. Some wanted him to succeed, others wanted him to fail, but all of them were curious to see what would happen. The young human stood up slowly and looked around at hundreds of alien faces staring back at him. He thought about his family on Earth, who had no idea their son was about to represent all of humanity in a challenge. That could change how the galaxy viewed his species. "I accept too," Day said in a voice that was steady, despite his racing heart. The auditorium erupted in excited conversation as beings discussed what they had just witnessed. Some were already placing bets on the outcome, while others debated the implications of what they were about to see. But Instructor Rax was no longer looking amused. His yellow eyes had taken on the focused intensity of a predator that had found worthy prey. For the first time since meeting the human, He was treating Day like a real opponent rather than an annoying insect. This was no longer about training or education. This was about proving which species truly deserved to be called warriors. And everyone in the auditorium knew that only one of them would still be standing when it was over.